You are tuned in to a fireside chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
Greetings, and welcome to a fireside chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Lance White. Tonight, my guest is Stella Osorojos. Stella is a writer and doctor of Oriental medicine. A former editor at Condé Nast Traveler, she has published articles in Spirituality and Health, Sacred Hoop, In Style, Reality Sandwich, Travel and Leisure, among other publications. Tonight, we'll be talking about her new book from Evolver Editions called Star Sister. In her own words, it is about how I changed my name, grew wings, and learned to trust intuition. It's a beautiful spiritual journey which speaks to the awakening soul within each of us. So let's welcome Stella to the show now. Hi, Stella. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. So it's a
pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm so delighted to have you on the show. You know, I realized when I about this name change that one of my best friends for over 40 years was in a Gurdjieff Ouspensky school with me back in the 70s. She's passed right now. She's not with us in physical form, but she was a writer, and her name was Stella, and she was my best friend for, a good 35, 40 years. And I feel like she's still with me. She hovers over my shoulder periodically when I'm writing.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd mention that little synchronicity.
Huh. And did she change her name to Stella, or was that always her name?
That was her given name. So.
Oh, uh-huh.
But what I noticed about your life is that it hardly started out on a spiritual footing, which I guess is probably pretty typical, since when we come in here, it's to experience life at its fullest and find the material realms and discover what they're about and work our way through those. So maybe we could go back a little bit on how your journey began.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Rhode Island and was pretty intuitive from an early age. I'm not really sure why, just I was. And, I say in the book that I was, I read a lot and I was sort of quiet, and my mother just guffawed when she read that line. She said I was not quiet at all, so I don't really know what the truth is there. But, I felt like I had a lot of time to myself when I was growing up. I did a lot of reading and a lot of introspection, and perhaps that helped me be in touch with my intuition. But I always have listened to my intuition, and that's just been part of who I am. It's just what I listen to, although I didn't necessarily identify it as such. I didn't really start to do that until later, although I am half Colombian, too. My dad is Colombian, and so there's a great allowance for spiritual life in that tradition. So perhaps there was at least leeway for me to cultivate that part of myself growing up. Gabriel Garcia Marquez actually talks about it, and his books are sort of full of magical realism, and he says, well, it's not magical realism, that's the way Colombians are. And I think he's totally right. That's actually how Colombians experience the world. So, and he always loves the way, I read some interview with him where he said that he loves the way that his books are translated into English, because English language is sort of has more realism. It has sort of more just inherent in its view of the world, and so he loves the way that translating his work into English, how it makes his work come out. It sort of gives it more magic, and not like it's something. It's like como anda. It's like how Colombians walk, but actually but in English it sort of sounds more realistic. And I think my book is actually really infused with that sensibility.
Mm-hmm.
I live with a lot of magic in a lot of ways, and always have.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I identified with that quite a bit. And
you did,
so
yeah.
funny.
You sound like you do.
You mentioned a lot of different aspects in movies and this and that, and one I hadn't heard of, which I ordered yesterday off the internet, but I enjoyed the fact that you enjoyed the movie V for Vendetta. That's one of my favorite films, along with the Matrix trilogy, of course. I mean, that is the classic.
The Matrix trilogy is like the classic of our time in a lot of ways, and not least because it's a movie. I think movies are so much our language these days, but V for Vendetta is like the great overlooked movie, I think, of our time.
Oh yeah.
It so encodes the experience that so many of us are having. And and for me, it came at a time I had just had this big awakening experience that I radically did not expect. Like, it just came out of the blue. And so to then watch that movie hard on the heels of this really mind-blowing experience helps me quite a bit. And I think that that's what stories do. You know, they help us make sense of the world around us in a way that's really gentle.
Yes.
The best of stories do that.
Yes, I agree with you on that one. When was your first awakening? I don't remember in the book. By the way, I loved your book, Star Sister, and I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful read. And I don't remember, though, when your first awakening actually happened.
Well, I kind of peg it in the book. You know, I think you're right when you say that we all come kind of into this plane with an agenda, you know, for awakening. And so if you start to look back and try to pinpoint when that happened, you can go back to your earliest memory in a way. And that's actually where the name of the book came from. But anyway, but really what I sort of pinpoint as my big awakening experience was around my name change. So I had this kind of weird, and I'm just going to give a little sort of short synopsis of the book here, but I had this really strong desire to change my name when I turned 35 that kind of came out of the blue, and I followed it, maybe, who knows why, and I followed it, and it led to this awakening experience that I had, where I just kind of cracked my ego open on the question of who am I? You know, what is my name? And so there was really one moment in a chair where I was, you know, between names, literally, and killing off all of them, that I realized that I was something much bigger than a name. The name that I had been given, certainly, and the name that I wanted to become also was sort of dying in front of my eyes, and that was really the moment where I saw myself as being something bigger. And I think that's like that's just the key. We're bigger than our ego. We're bigger than our name, and it's sort of, that's all it is. Actually, it's not something bigger than that. It's not. You know, I had this wonderful experience after having that experience, where I called up my best friend from like the time I was 3, and I said, "Well, I figured out I'm not my name," and she was like, "Well, duh." Like, I know I'm not my name. And I thought maybe she didn't understand something about the experience that I had, but I also thought, well, maybe she did. And like, it's not that big of a deal, and it's natural, like, to know that we're not part of our name. Maybe it was just something I was hung up on, or who knows? But it was a really grounding experience for her to, like, for me to think that it was a big deal, and for her to say, no, it's not. And so, so that's like the short answer is, like, it was really around the name change, and that's actually the part of the book that I'm most proud of. There's a couple of pages in there where I try and describe that, and probably don't come anywhere near it. But and then in my life, kind of that was the most life-changing moment for me so far. And then, of course, to have Sarah say, not a big deal, was also really wonderful. Which I don't think that's in the book, but it was actually quite a great experience.
Well, then after that, after that experience, you started to pursue a different path, which included different forms of spirituality, and you were also looking into acupuncture, I believe, and Oriental medicine, Eastern medicine. And
yeah, I had started. I was a writer in New York City. I was working for magazines and doing a lot of travel writing for magazines, and following my intuition, I kind of went to acupuncture school, and then stopped for a while. Couldn't figure out why I was there, what my career trajectory was supposed to be, and then I just. Yeah, I was in acupuncture school and already, and then I started meditating as a result of that. I wasn't really affiliated with any particular religious tradition. I had started meditating mostly in my living room. I mean, I had influences, but none of them were really steady. Mm-hmm. One of actually the major influences was that I got married in Japan. As a travel writer, I just figured, let's go someplace to get married to my first husband, Aaron.
Oh, yeah, it was a very romantic description of your marriage in Japanese. It was quite interesting. I liked that part.
Yeah, it was such a blessing, actually, that ceremony. We didn't really plan it. We were really busy at the time, and we knew he was also a travel writer, and so we figured we should go someplace that we had never been, and it kind of came up through a series of kind of coincidences that we should go to Japan, and we did, and our tourist agent, our kind of travel agent, just had a sensei in Japan, and he agreed to do a ceremony, and we found ourselves in this centuries-old temple that was just gorgeous beyond belief, and the ceremony being conducted in Japanese. We didn't understand a word of it, but it was gorgeous nonetheless, and it really was a beautiful, it was a beautiful time, and it was portentous, too, in the sense that it really put us on a spiritual path. I really think of that marriage as having been a partnership of spiritual buddies in a lot of ways. There's a lot about in this book about my difficulty with that relationship, and that I wanted to have children, and he didn't. But what we did have was a very rich spiritual relationship, and we really explored our spiritual life together, but not in one particular tradition. You know, we became members of a Buddhist center in Santa Fe ultimately, and we practiced meditating. But even then, we weren't necessarily whole hog about. I don't know. We were just exploring. I think a lot of people actually can relate to that these days too, because of how much exposure we have to different traditions, and it's very easy to pick and choose, and take the wisdom where we find it and create our own way. And I think that is very appropriate for today. Actually, I think that that's kind of where it's at in terms of religion. It's like where is your heart calling you? That's kind of the key.
Yes, that does seem to be the case, and you do mention the heart quite a bit in the book.
Yeah, I do. That's funny. Yeah, I relate it to almost every part of the anatomy. Actually, in studies, there's like one part where I love this part of this book actually, where I talk about how the relationship of the heart to the uterus, and because there was one point in my life where I was really profoundly struck by how similar the uterus and the heart were, that they're both kind of muscular, hollow organs, and and I also saw this correlation, but it's like when you conceive a child, you think you conceive it in the uterus, but actually I think you conceive it in the heart first.
Well, there's a particular passage where you are talking about negative extraterrestrials and David Icke. And at the bottom of the page, would you mind if I read just a little bit of it?
No, no.
I thought this was beautiful. I'll just pull the part about the heart. I stumbled upon the truth about my heart. I realized that although everything around me might be in utter chaos, I could always trust my heart. Unlike my brain, which was subject to the influences of TV and the faulty textbooks and perseverating tendencies, the guidance of my heart would never fall under the aegis of anyone or anything but myself. As long as I listened, truly listened, to the whisper of my heart, I would always be fine.
Yeah.
I thought that was just lovely.
Thank you.
And there's
Thank you.
a
I
lot
actually
of...
that part in particular was very influenced for me from one of my teachers, an acupuncture teacher called Mikia Sankey, who taught me a form of acupuncture called esoteric acupuncture, and he really he planted that seed in me about, discern the whisper. He has a book called Discern the Whisper, and what he means is discern the whisper of your heart. That's really all you have to do. And so when I had that, I had this great moment of panic right after having this big awakening that had to do with ETs and kind of what I was perceiving about the power structures of the planet, and I really was in a lot of terror,
Yeah.
just terror, just like abject terror about what I was perceiving and what I should do, and really casting around for anything to hold on to, and I really hit upon that truth that he had probably planted, and I'm sure other people had too, but it really was true. There's also, I talk about later, the Buddha. You know, this when the Buddha encounters Mara, he also finds solace in his heart, and those stories actually I learned about them later. They sort of made sense of what I was having, I was experiencing. But in the moment, it was really just true that my heart, in the moment, like moment by moment, my heart was a place where I could rest, or where I could be solid. Whatever my heart really, whichever direction my heart said to go was. I want to say safe, but I don't mean safe in the sense that I would be free of danger. Just true in the moment. Like, what is truth? Like, what is the truth of the world? Is it true that we're very often enslaved by forces that we can't see? Maybe. Doesn't really matter, though. Just stay with what's true in your heart in that moment, and you'll be okay. You'll get through those moments that really terrify you, and then you'll find a moment where there's bliss, or there's affection or love, or something easier to deal with.
And in the awakening process too, I found that there are many times when there will be a breakdown, and that on the other side of breakdown is breakthrough. So a lot of dark nights of the soul that you talk about, and all of us have experienced and continue to experience to some level, include breakthroughs. Sometimes I feel that they're there for contrast. And then in other times it just seems like a spiral that just keeps going around, and it just spirals a little bit higher each time, so we never descend quite to the same depths that we have in the past.
Yeah. I had a teacher that talked about it that way too, where, and in fact, I think I learned this in acupuncture school. A Tai Chi teacher or a Qigong teacher who talked about, it's like if you picture a curve on a graph that kind of goes up, and there are great crevasses in the trajectory upward. And actually, as you go upward, the crevasses sort of get deeper and bigger. But you're still, but the general trend upward is always preserved. So you, as you become stronger in your, and I don't mean to say upward as in higher or whatever, but
right.
as you whatever, as you move along your path, you find the strength to handle more and more. So sometimes those dark nights of the soul get worse and worse. But that's only really because you can handle them.
Right, right.
And
that's
right. That has been true for me. Although you really do get to a place like I don't know, in some ways that first head bump you do against the wall of whatever reality cracking, like that first face to face that you reach is in some ways the hardest because you don't necessarily know what you're doing. Like you've never had an experience like this before, and so the uncertainty of the actual situation plus the uncertainty of, well, this has never happened to me before. Does this happen to people? Like, who even knows?
Right.
That is often the hardest. Like later on, okay, maybe the difficulty is actually much more intense in some ways, but at least you've been through it once or twice or 3 times or 4 times or 5 times before, and then it's like, okay, I know the ropes at least.
Right, and plus you get to know other people who have been through some of these things who can...
Right, because because once you've had the first experience, then you go sort of scrambling around to try and find somebody else who's had an experience like this, and bingo, they pop up all over the place. But until you've had that first experience, you don't even know that there's such a thing.
Well, yes, and it does seem to me, I don't know how you see it in your practice and in life, but it does seem that people are just having spontaneous awakenings where some people that I know have been awake for 30 or 40 years and have had to endure all of those years of ignorance and having nobody to talk to.
I can't imagine.
Yes. I had one friend, Gerardus, who just passed. He was in his 80s, and he had awakened in his 30s. So he had to sit around and wait for the rest of us to catch up. And
wow,
but he was such a wise man and so full of life and
that was like in the first couple of weeks after I had that awakening experience, which I don't want to put too much on it. It was an awakening experience, but it was not the end of the story.
Right.
So, but after that first awakening experience, I was like, well, who knows about this? Other people, it seems like other people might know about it, but maybe other people don't know about it at all. Like, there's really, for me, like being outside of a tradition, I just didn't have any clue what was going on. And so it was like, who knows about this? And you would look at, I was looking for the light in somebody's eyes, and you say certain things, and are they getting it or are they not getting it? And you could sort of, connect. I was like, some people, but then once in a while you'd see this old hippie. You'd somehow meet this old hippie, and you know that they had known about this for 30 years or whatever. And what a treasure.
Oh yeah.
To be held in that amount of confidence.
Yes.
Not only have I had this experience, but I've survived for 30 or 40 years, and it's okay. You will too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and it gets better.
And and you find some like beautiful grace where you just walk around the world with a smile on your face, and it's all fine, and none of it, and it doesn't really matter, even if it's all heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I noticed too is that our ability to contain diverse contrasts, extremes of information, is part of the process. And I've been through the process where I ignore the conspiracy side, and I go on the love and light side, and then sometimes I'll go from the love and light and I'll go to the conspiracy. But the more that I can contain within myself the extremes of truth that I have discovered and just let it be what it is and not judge it, the more it opens up for me in terms of being able to just glide through life.
That's beautiful.
Well, it's not easy either.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I don't know, I've been hanging out with Charles Eisenstein now lately for about a year now, and he's very heavily on the love and light side. And I try to really not, actually, it's not even a question for me. Like I sort of grappled with the whole darkness conspiracy thing for a little while, and I made peace with it in a really profound way. Like, I haven't actually gone back and grappled that much with it since then. And I was really actually helped by my first husband, who read, I think, a Michael Harner book, The Way the Shaman. There's a little story in there, which I think I recount in my book, about Michael Harner starts meditating and starts seeing little green men who are quite vicious and difficult for him, and he finally freaks out and goes and tells his teacher, "These green dudes are freaking me out. What do I do?" And the teacher says, "Those guys." No, and Michael Harner had no idea if this is true even or not, but his teacher just goes, "Those guys, don't pay any attention to them," which I just love. I don't know, and that's sort of that's the peace I came to with it. I kind of think everything everybody says is sort of true, and I try not to give it that much attention. I mean, I get that we all need to come into our personal sovereignty and claim, our space and our own destiny, and be done with the karma of slavery and whatever manifestation it may take. Mm-hmm. But we don't necessarily do that by harping on the difficult parts of what we have been through. We do so by bowing to our past experience in gratitude, and then turning around and going, okay, how do we make this world better?
Exactly.
That's where, how do we make this world the most beautiful place that we could live in? Let's put our attention there.
Yep.
We've been traveling around for this past year. I've been traveling around with Charles and going all over the place. And everywhere we go, there are people hosting us and putting together workshops. And they're not doing it for us. They're doing it for their own communities. And it is the most beautiful thing to see people being in service to their communities. It's that's everything. It's an honor to witness it all over the place.
Well, and then plus it's so important for that to happen because over time it's been kind of the symbiotic process of us giving away our power to those who gladly take it and then use it against us. And it's also been a process of having it eroded or taken from us. So it's not that we're victims, but more that we simply allowed our power to, trickle into the hands of those who use it to control us. And so now I see a movement, or many movements, many different movements, that are designed to bring people together at the heart level and create new communities. And I think that's where the changes are going to start to manifest.
Yeah, transition movements are really important, and time banks where they pop up are really great. And anything you can do to strengthen the ties within your own community and move into being in gift, in your community, meaning anything you can do to just be in community with each other, help each other out, and take care of each other, and find alternative ways to source your food, and find alternative ways to source your child care and your health, and anything you can do to take back your all the gifts that you have to give and give them to each other is implicitly a repudiation of anything that might be, wanting it sort of implicitly takes your energy away from anything you might not want it to be going towards. If you're in control of not in control, but if you're if you're managing your energy, if you're directing your energy in the ways you really want it to go, then that can only be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I wanted to ask you about some of your teachers, and maybe you could share some of the profound experiences that you've had with, for instance, JT during the Peruvian trip. I thought that was a very powerful journey that you shared with us.
Yeah, I had some amazing experiences in Peru, and I had a good friend actually who took me there the first time, but his teacher and my teachers there are really the mountains. In Peru, the Q'ero people have this unbroken tradition of communion with both the spirits that live in the earth, the Pachamamas, and in the mountains, they're called the Apus. So these are spirits, and I've really been, I feel, in close connection with the mountain spirits, both in Peru and then here, or been in service to them, and we've, I think, all been in service to the same vision of a more beautiful world. But so I went to Peru the first time with this great guy who I met, in a backyard party, and he took us to Peru somewhat blind. We didn't really know what was going to happen, and we showed up there and learned some things about the culture, and did some, all of which I describe in the book, Star Sister. But then we also got the experience on the very first trip of participating in a ceremony in which the Apus would manifest in ceremony. And that was beyond extraordinary. It was just utterly mind-blowing to be sitting there in ceremony and like feel these beings kind of come through the walls and show up there and then start talking. Mm-hmm. It's like you, like I say that and you're thinking, you must be thinking, what? No, she didn't really say that, right? Like, no, she must be talking metaphorically or something. And honestly, like, took me a year probably after having had that experience to really accept that was what had happened. Mm. Partly because of the way it's set up, it's done in the dark and all these other things. But actually, I don't have any doubt now that was what happened. And what can I say? It was like totally mind-blowing and earth-shattering and paradigm-shifting and just changing. And I live in a world now where the mountains are not like, humps of earth over there in the distance that we look at and think are beautiful, but they are living beings, and I talk to them. Mm-hmm. And I am not like a weirdo. Like, I'm really a sane person. If you saw me, I mean, I'm pretty normal. But I really did have this incredible experience that has shifted
just
my
a weirdo
inside. What's that?
You're just a weirdo inside with a
inside, exactly. I'm a hidden weirdo. But I mean, that's like the first thing people meet me and they're like, "Wow, you're not weird at all." I'm like, "No, I wear J. Crew. Like, I'm pretty normal."
Well, the shamans and the indigenous tribes and many, 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 many millions of people have been communicating with the spirits of Earth.
Yeah, hello. I just didn't know. It's
yeah,
ignorant speaking here.
It's an amazing. I've had guests on the show that talk to the wee people and the divas and elementals and so on and so forth. So they've opened some doors for me as well.
Yeah.
And, Then I have one of my good friends.
And I read those books. I read those books about the she, the she in Ireland.
Yeah.
It's a great book. It's called The She. I think Siddh. I don't know who wrote it, sadly, but. Loved it, I thought, wow, yeah, I totally believe that. But like until I sat there in ceremony with the Apus manifesting, it was like sort of theoretical and not really happening. And it's a story, it's on paper, it's like not really real. But then, to have the experience and was just on a different level.
Mm-hmm. You had some experiences with one of my former guests and one of my favorite article writers and teachers, Lisa Renee.
Oh, yeah.
Would you like to share a little bit about what led to that meeting and some of the experiences?
Well, actually, it was after I had this... I was living in Los Angeles at the time when I had that experience of my name change kind of blowing the top of my head off. And some friends were somewhat concerned about me, and one dear friend, Dana, said, I really think you should go see this person who's an ET who will probably maybe calm some of your fears about ETs. And I was like, oh no, there's no way I'm going to go sit in a room with an ET. That's the last thing I wanted to do. and I just assiduously stayed away for a few months, and then kind of came around to it. Ultimately, in the middle of the night, I thought, well, I'll go check out her website, and then found myself weeping because her story was so similar to mine in so many ways, and blah blah blah. So then I made an appointment with her in L.A., and it was really classic. I've come to see that it was really classic in the sense that, trying to get there was like really hard. There was all this static around it, and it was like I was given every opportunity to turn around and not go, and I just persevered and kind of cut through. And she said the same thing. Wow, did you notice all the static trying to get here? It was so hard, and I kind of knew at that moment that I was going to be madly in love with her, and in fact still am. She's just she's great personally, but then she's also held this really important piece for me along the way. She has this monthly call that she does where she just lets people know what's going on from her perspective in the world in terms of ascension, or what she calls ascension. And I'm a journal. I wouldn't say that I'm a journalist by training, but I dabbled in the world of journalism, and I always have an ear for, could you corroborate this? And almost nothing she says you could corroborate. So I make that, I'm going to say that outright, but I still really trust her.
Yeah.
And largely because my experience so much matched up with what she was explaining month to month. So every month she'd get on the call or every month I would have something going on with me, like, I don't know, my hand suddenly would start hurting. And then she'd get on this call and say, okay, so everybody's having this symptom about, their hands are hurting, and it has to do with, we're clearing, something to do with hands on a global scale.
Right.
And the next month it would be like, oh, we're having a fluttering in our pancreas. And I had this like fluttering in my pancreas that I really couldn't explain in any other way. So it was like month after month after month after month after month after month. She was just, illuminating some piece that I was experiencing personally. And that was really powerful for me. And then, but I was also actually seeing the same kind of thing happening in my practice, where people would come in to see me. I'm a doctor of Oriental medicine and do acupuncture, and people, like everybody, one week, everybody would come in with it, and they would have had to have emergency root canals. I mean, it was so random. Or like even on a cellular level, like everybody on one day would all have to have like a liver gallbladder treatment. Like just the connection between people was becoming so obvious to me. And she was a really big piece of illuminating that on a grander scale. And so I found that just really valuable. And, she's, I don't understand half of what she says, but I believe, or I really enjoy listening to what she does have to say, and always find a piece of value.
Well, I do too. I read her reports every month when they come out, and I always get something valuable out of them. So and I have friends that just adore her and have followed her for years. So and like you said, life is a smorgasbord. We take what resonates and leave the rest behind. You don't have to take the whole ball of wax.
Right.
You know, a lot of things I don't understand either that, you know, she might be talking about. And I think, okay, well, that's gobbledygook to me. I'll leave that behind, and I'll take this other part here that I understand, because I have kind of a limited mental capacity to, you know, understand things. They have to be written very simply, you know.
Yes, yeah.
But you talked about your acupuncture, and is that what you're doing today for a living?
No, I am. Well, I mean, I moved to. I was in Santa Fe, and I was seeing patients there, and also doing some tutoring, and I was also teaching at the New Mexico Academy of Healing Arts, doing teaching anatomy, and kind of cobbling together a living that way, more or less. And then I got divorced, which is, you know, is talked about at the end of my book, and wound up in Harrisburg, of all places, Pennsylvania, married to Charles. And so I've only been here for about a year. It's actually, we got married in August of last summer. So
wonderful.
We're coming up on our first-year anniversary, yeah.
And I do understand it keeps you busy.
I haven't really settled
right.
since then.
You did write about that part of it. I won't go into. I'll let people find out for themselves. But it does sound like you have a very full life.
Yeah. I mean, it's just been. You know, it's like one of the big questions in the book is how do I wanted to have my own children, and now I have 3 beautiful stepsons. So that has been a great blessing, and also like I've been just running, trying to catch up too. You know, trying to figure out what I'm doing and what needs to be done, and you know, it's been a tumult of a year. So I do a little bit of acupuncture. I do like group acupuncture sessions in particular, in here in Harrisburg, kind of sacred geometry based and really fun. I do some esoteric acupuncture, a la Mikio Sanki, and then I do see patients, but you know, like occasionally and in my living room. So it's very seat of the pants.
Well, you know, I was surprised to read about the extent of knowledge that you have to have in order to have a degree in acupuncture. And you went into some of the classes and the studies that you have to take, and it sounds even more complicated, far more complicated than getting a medical degree.
Yeah. I mean, it basically is a medical degree in China. And so to do it here means that you are doing a medical degree but in Chinese. So, you know, I do get a little frustrated. It's also a 4-year degree. I mean, it's including, you know, you have to have an undergraduate degree. So, and in California, they add 2 more years and they make it a 6-year degree to kind of correlate it with a medical degree here. And it's a perfectly valid thing to do because we, in fact, are doctors. We are not always accorded that status, but it basically is a medical degree. I mean, actually, to be an acupuncturist in China, you only need 2 years, and you get 4 years only if you're really good, and you get more training only if you're really good. So, yeah, it's can you hear the little bit of annoyance in my voice? Like, you know, it's like we get sort of lumped in with other modalities where there's not actually that level of rigor, and that's okay. But it's also a little frustrating sometimes.
But do you feel that that the alternative practices such as acupuncture and the various related medical treatments that come from the East are more holistic in approach than the Western medicine, which seems to be designed to kill everything undesirable?
Well, I mean, I don't know about all of them, but I mean, and I really can't speak to all of them, but Chinese medicine is based on an understanding. Its deep roots are Taoist, and so it's based on an understanding of the natural world. It takes the metaphors of the natural world and views the body through that lens. So but also with this deep understanding that we're not separate from nature. So when we and from all the pieces, so everything is seen in relation, and so in that sense, it's very holistic and very different from Western medicine, which is
divide and conquer.
Yeah, I mean, it's really about looking at something, in outside of the context of the whole all the time. It's like if you're a nephrologist and you're just looking at the kidneys and you're just looking at the particular functions of the kidneys. I mean, there are specialties that are more holistic in nature. Endocrinologists, or kind of like an endocrinologist is almost the correlative of what a Chinese doctor does. But where you're looking at if one endocrine, if the thyroid hormone is off, then, or if the adrenal system is off, then it's going to affect the thyroid hormone, which is going to affect, whatever digestive, that there are consequences, and there's a dance between them all. That's sort of understood in some of the specialties, but it's not. But that's really the strength of Chinese medicine, to see the dance between all the different systems and to not see anything as being a system that exists in outside of a symphony.
I have a question for you that I thought might be fun to ask. What is the most significant aspect of your path over these many years that you'd like to share with us tonight that might help other people to with their journeys?
Wow. The most significant aspect of my past that has that I want to share. Well, I guess I'll start with the most obvious. And actually, I only say this because I've been meeting, it's like everywhere I go lately, I've been meeting people who have changed their names. This is one of the ways, people ask me what my book is about, and I always say, well, I changed my name as an art project, and it led to an unexpected spiritual awakening. And that is not entirely true. Like, I did do that, but I did that only kind of in retrospect. Actually, I was sort of following my intuition and changing my name, and then I cobbled together this idea about it being an art project to make it sort of sound more palatable to myself. But actually, I was just going where my heart was leading me. And I guess I would encourage people to do the crazy thing that they think of doing that makes absolutely no sense.
Yes.
If it's coming from their heart. That has actually never led me wrong throughout my life. And it has really, what my heart speaking to me has sort of been at the fore of every major crazy thing that I've ever done, and it's always turned out well. So I would really encourage people, as Mikio would say, to discern the whisper. And, it's just also reading this book by Judith Orloff, who kind of talks about how to do that. And she talks a lot about meditation and other things, but ultimately it all just gets down to, what does your heart really want? Do that. I mean, I don't, that's I think that's the key. I mean, I keep doing crazy things.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's really one of the big...
I left Santa Fe and moved in with this crazy guy, and now I'm living in Harrisburg, of all places. Like look at the overarching, you left Santa Fe to go to Harrisburg. Why in the world would you do that? But it's an amazing
process, and it takes a certain amount of daring and boldness to be able to be that spontaneous and make those choices and do something that just completely doesn't make any sense at all, that's just off the charts.
Yeah,
because we don't know where life will lead.
It seems, actually, I was telling Charles this the other day, that it seems really daring and bold, but actually the I Ching really held I use the I Ching, not every day, but pretty much every day, just checking in with it.
I used it today.
It has been a great help and guide, especially through all the crazy...
it's a valuable tool.
Yeah, it really
I
is.
love it. I've been doing it for years, and I have a computer version that is one of the best ones on the market. And I ran it today just to see what it would say, and it was very appropriate for, it was good guidance. It was very good guidance.
It just always is. It's astonishing.
Yes.
It's a great gift to us. It really is. It always. I mean, you still have to be sovereign. You still
Right.
have to. Like, there are still days where you go, not so much. I'm not going to listen to this. And you have to discern when that might be. But it's always a helpful voice in the cacophony, I find.
There's probably one other question that I thought might be interesting for the listeners tonight, and that is, if you had to choose one experience for its profound shift on your soul, what would that be?
Well, I talked a little bit about that moment in the chair with my name change, and I write about that in the book. So I'll save that for people to read. Something that I didn't write about that was really profoundly effective, profound moment in my life. You know what? They've almost always been dreams. My dream life, I talk about in the book about dreams as being important moments, but after, and I don't really talk about this in the book, but when I had a dream actually about Charles that indicated to me, before I knew him really, that indicated to me that we might have something between us, and that was a total life changer, and I point to that actually in terms of a larger audience because I guess I'm really thinking about ways to help people be more in touch with their intuition lately. And that's one for me. That's been. I'm really realizing that's been a profound way that my dreams have been a real font of kind of wisdom and connection for me. That I've really been able to touch into who I am and where I should go and what I need through my dream life. And certain dreams that I've had have been really life-changing. All the really life-changing moments that I've had have been sourced from dreams.
Wow. Well, some people have a natural ability for that, and can lucid dream. I have a friend who can pull himself in and out of dreams, and just before he dies, he just pulls himself out of the dream. So, yes, I agree with you that the dreams can be very helpful and very prophetic. We're almost out of time, and I wanted you to be able to mention your website and where people could go to find your book and so on and so forth before we end the show.
Okay, well, it's Stella Osorojos. The book is called Star Sister, and you can find me at Stella at osorojos.com. That's OSOROJOS. The website is osorojos.com or underthepine.com. I think it's also star-sister.com. You can all be able to the same website. And you can find out information about group acupuncture sessions that I might be holding in the central Pennsylvania area. And the book can be found on Amazon.com and at your local bookstore. Please actually go into your local bookstore and ask for it. And it's published through North Atlantic Books and other editions, and who also publish other great books, not Charles Eisenstein, not in the least, and Jonathan Talbot Phillips, and Daniel Pinchbeck, et cetera, So lots of great stuff from that imprint, of which I feel very lucky to be a part.
Well, wonderful. Well, I want to thank you for coming on the show tonight and sharing your story and your journey and your life. And I loved your book. I read it in 2 days. And,
That's actually something everybody's saying about it, is that it's a quick, easy, yummy read. So
it's juicy. It's nice, and it hits so many resonant points in my own life. Even though we have different lives, the items that resonate, the empathy, the intuition, the spiritual journey, even though it's entirely different, it's still kind of the same.
Ain't that the truth about these times? I mean,
and it does seem to be accelerating, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It certainly does, which is a beautiful thing. It's nice to see.
Yes. Well, Stella, thank you for being on tonight, and I wish you the best with your book. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much, Lance.
All righty. Good night, Stella, and good night, everybody. And her name was Stella, and she was my best friend for, a good 35, 40 years. And I feel like she's still with me. She hovers over my shoulder periodically when I'm writing.
Yeah.
So I just thought I'd mention that little synchronicity.
Huh. And did she change her name to Stella, or was that always her name?
That was her given name. So.
Oh, uh-huh.
But what I noticed about your life is that it hardly started out on a spiritual footing, which I guess is probably pretty typical, since when we come in here, it's to experience life at its fullest and find the material realms and discover what they're about and work our way through those. So maybe we could go back a little bit on how your journey began.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Rhode Island and was pretty intuitive from an early age. I'm not really sure why, just I was. And, I say in the book that I was, I read a lot and I was sort of quiet, and my mother just guffawed when she read that line. She said I was not quiet at all, so I don't really know what the truth is there. But, I felt like I had a lot of time to myself when I was growing up. I did a lot of reading and a lot of introspection, and perhaps that helped me be in touch with my intuition. But I always have listened to my intuition, and that's just been part of who I am. It's just what I listen to, although I didn't necessarily identify it as such. I didn't really start to do that until later, although I am half Colombian, too. My dad had this really strong desire to change my name when I turned 35 that kind of came out of the blue, and I followed it. Maybe, who knows why. And I followed it, and it led to this awakening experience that I had where I just kind of cracked my ego open on the question of who am I? What is my name? And so there was really one moment in a chair where I was, between names, literally, and killing off all of them, that I realized that I was something much bigger than a name, than the name that I had been given, certainly, and the name that I wanted to become also was sort of dying in front of my eyes, and that was really the moment where I saw myself as being something bigger, and I think that's like that's just the key. We're bigger than our ego. We're bigger than our name, and it's sort of, that's all it is. Actually, it's not something bigger than that. It's not. I had this wonderful experience after having that experience, where I called up my best friend from the time I was 3, and I said, "Well, I figured out I'm not my name," and she was like, "Well, duh." I know I'm not my name. And I thought maybe she didn't understand something about the experience that I had, but I also thought, well, maybe she did. And, it's not that big of a deal. And it's natural, to know that we're not part of our name. Maybe it was just something I was hung up on, or who knows? Who knows? But it was a really grounding experience for her to, for me to think that it was a big deal, and for her to say, no, it's not. And so...
You are tuned in to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. Join us now on another exciting metaphysical journey. Relax, tune in, drop out, and take a seat by the fire as we explore new realms and possibilities. This is Magenta Pixie. You can find me at magentapixie.weebly.com. But now, here is Zany Mystic and guest. Enjoy the show.
Greetings, and welcome to a Fireside Chat with Zany Mystic. I'm your host, Lance White. Tonight, my guest is Stella Osorojos. Stella is a writer and doctor of Oriental medicine. A former editor at Condé Nast Traveler, she has published articles in Spirituality and Health, Sacred Hoop, In Style, Reality Sandwich, Travel and Leisure, among other publications. Tonight, we'll be talking about her new book from Evolver Editions called Star Sister. In her own words, it is about how I changed my name, grew wings, and learned to trust intuition. It's a beautiful spiritual journey which speaks to the awakening soul within each of us. So let's welcome Stella to the show now. Hi, Stella. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. So it's
a pleasure to be here.
Oh, I'm so delighted to have you on the show. You know, I realized when I about this name change that one of my best friends for over 40 years was in a Gurdjieff Ouspensky school with me back in the 70s. She's passed right now. She's not with us in physical form, but she was a writer.
Yeah, the Matrix trilogy is like the classic of our time in a lot of ways, and not least because it's a movie. I think movies are so much our language these days. But V for Vendetta is like the great overlooked movie I think of our time.
Oh yeah,
it so encodes the experience that so many of us are having, and and for me it came at a time I had just had this big awakening experience that I radically did not expect. Like, it just came out of the blue. And so to then watch that movie hard on the heels of this really mind-blowing experience helps me quite a bit. And I think that that's what stories do. You know, they help us make sense of the world around us in a way that's really gentle.
Yes.
The best of stories do that.
Yes, I agree with you on that one. When was your first awakening? I don't remember in the book. By the way, I loved your book, Star Sister, and I highly recommend it. It's a wonderful read. And I don't remember, though, when your first awakening actually happened.
Well, I kind of peg it in the book. You know, I think you're right when you say that we all come kind of into this plane with an agenda, you know, for awakening. And so if you start to look back and try to pinpoint when that happened, you can go back to your earliest memory in a way. And that's actually where the name of the book came from. But anyway, but really what I sort of pinpoint as my big awakening experience was around my name change. So I had this kind of weird, and I'm just going to give a little sort of short synopsis of the book here, but I had this dad as Colombian, and so there's a great allowance for spiritual life in that tradition. So perhaps there was at least leeway for me to cultivate that part of myself growing up. Gabriel Garcia Marquez actually talks about it, and his books are sort of full of magical realism, and he says, well, it's not magical realism, that's the way Colombians are. And I think he's totally right. That's actually how Colombians experience the world. So and he always loves the way I read some interview with him where he said that he loves the way that his books are translated into English, because English language has more realism. It has sort of more just inherent in its view of the world, and so he loves the way that translating his work into English, how it makes his work come out. It sort of gives it more magic and not like it's something. It's like como anda. It's like how Colombians walk, but in English it sort of sounds more realistic. And I think my book is actually really infused with that sensibility. I live with a lot of magic in a lot of ways, and always have.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I identified with that quite a bit. And
you did,
so
yeah.
funny.
You sound like you do.
You mentioned a lot of different aspects in movies and this and that, and one I hadn't heard of, which I ordered yesterday off the internet, but I enjoyed the fact that you enjoyed the movie V for Vendetta. That's one of my favorite films, along with the Matrix trilogy, of course. I mean, that is